Hey, I'm Scott Cawelti. I came to Iowa City to read at Prairie Lights, the book I've just finished and is sort of out and about, The Brothers' Blood, which is about the Jerry Mark murders in Cedar Falls. Jerry Mark was a classmate of mine, and I've been writing about it since roughly 1980. I turned it into an actual book starting in 2006, and I thought it was worth talking about, and certainly it's generated a lot of interest because everybody in Cedar Falls remembers the Mark family. And I knew Jerry Mark personally. He graduated a year ahead of me in high school. 1961, he graduated in 1960, I graduated in 1961. And he was vice president of the senior class. He was a lawyer, Peace Corps volunteer, all-around good guy who turned out to be a murderer of his own family. He murdered his brother, his brother's wife, and their two little kids in their beds on Halloween night, 1975. One of the most shocking crimes Cedar Falls has ever seen. In fact, one of the most shocking crimes imaginable, because it was a cold-blooded execution of his own family. I mean, it'd be like shooting yourself in a way. So I'm here to talk about that and to try to get people interested in understanding it. I never say to people enjoy it because it's a terrible story, but we need to understand what happens to people, how they go so far off the tracks. Do you think he did it, is the first question. And of course, it's not a whodunit. I know who did it. I think he did it. And not only do I think he did it, everybody who looks at the case thinks he did it. So it's not so much a suspense story. We know he did it. The jury decided, and the evidence all pointed to him. He's never admitted it. There was all circumstantial evidence, which makes it a difficult case. But the evidence was overwhelming. So it isn't so much who, it's why. So I'm talking about why. That's the first question. And the second question is, why? Why would he do such a thing? And that's where it gets complicated. It all begins with family dynamics, how families relate. The father was not on his side. His brother and he became competitors. The younger brother, in fact, took over the family operation. He became CEO of the entire Mark family business, which was a large real estate business, farming, well known in the community. And Jerry was living a kind of a loose lifestyle with no clear direction in life, even though he had a law degree and he would practice law in Iowa, legal aid lawyer in Des Moines. Even though he did all this, he had no direction. So greed, there was a $1 million operation, jealousy and anger, a massive white-hot anger toward his father, actually toward his brother too. He told a friend in California that my brother screwed me out of my farm. And he told his father that when the father died, and he was dying of cancer at the time, when you die, I'm going to come back and piss on your grave. That betrays a pretty serious anger condition, I would say. Well, you know, I've been a writer for years and years and years of newspaper columns. My favorite form is the 700-word essay, satire, opinion. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those. And it's mostly mental. I do it all the time. I mean, for a long time I had a weekly deadline of 2 columns. So in the back of my mind I was always working. And then usually there came a gelling point where the idea just took shape. And then I'd sit down, and it always had to be quiet. No distractions of any kind. Just a place in my study where I could just sit and kind of jam away on it. And usually it was improvisational for a while, kind of free writing we used to call it, and then it kind of turned into something worth reading after a long set of revisions. My writing always has become heavily, heavily revised. It actually gets pretty good after the 12th or 15th draft. Up till then it's just crap. It's awful stuff. So I realize I have to work to make it work. I have to work to make my writing work. It doesn't work at first at all. But eventually, if I'm patient, it kind of sculpts into something worth reading. I can't work with music because I'm a musician, and music to me is distracting in the sense that I have to listen to it. I can't have background music because I have to pay attention to it. That's my training, that's what I do partly, and music is a terrible distraction. I can have a little background TV noise on, but I find that distracting too. I just need silence, and silence is my best environment. I'm not a multitasker. Whenever I try to multitask, nothing works. Probably nonfiction more than fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. I spent a lot of time thinking about libel laws. I've been paying a lot of attention to the problems that authors have with writing about real people. So I've read several books. Actually, there are a couple books that have been written recently on this, because it's a real problem when you're writing about people who are still alive, who still know what they did, and they're going to compare what they did with what you think they did. And I've been trying to figure out ways to write disclaimers that really make sense. And I worked a long time on the disclaimer for this book, because I realized people know everything about this case. They know as much as I do. And here I am writing about it from a perspective of kind of an imagination. I call it imagined probabilities. I had to make stuff up because it isn't a story until you have some kind of imaginative connection. And when I did that, I realized that, well, people really do know what happened here. How am I going to? And I just had to make sure that whenever I did it, I was working with an area that nobody could know. It was like a family conversation. I knew the main point that came out, but I didn't know all the details of the conversation. So I made it up. And I know he must have had dreams along the way. Jerry Mark had dreams. So I had to make those up into kind of a literary story that I think works pretty well, but I have no idea what his dreams really were. So if he ever reads this or pays attention to it, he might say, I didn't have any dreams like that. Well, that's fair enough. But he's not talking about it. He's not going to talk to me about it. He claims it never happened. So here I am creating a character out of him. I'm using his life and his actions as the facts, but his mental life I'm sort of imagining in order to make it a worthwhile story. And in fact, the other way around it, this is the big deal, the other way around it is I put all my sources in. So you can read the sources without me. There are 60 pages of interviews, transcripts, newspaper stories. You can read all those. And if you want to see what it was like, just read that, and don't even read my imagined probabilities. It's not as interesting a story, I don't think. But music. Music and writing play off each other. I play the guitar a lot, I sing a lot, I made a CD, and that was a really, it's therapeutic for me to play music now, and then to write is therapeutic to get away from it's sort of I suppose it's left brain, right brain, I'm not sure. But it always feels good to get back to the writing when I've been playing, and it always feels good to get to the playing when I've been writing. Yeah, I try to avoid a lot of passives. It's so easy to get into passives. I just avoid passives like the plague, and I go through all the time and remove passive constructions. And I've learned that most every time my first and second and third drafts are way too fatty. They're full of word fat. I cut out the fat. I can usually get a sentence down to 10 words when it was 15 or 20. And then I can take the 10 words and get them down to 8. And sometimes I can get it down to 6 really good words. And those 6 words are good. But it took like 4 times to do it. All the writing I read is full of that. Everything I read I could cut down to way less, and it would be actually improved. I think most editors could do that. A good writer is a good editor most of the time, yeah, in my humble opinion, yeah. I'm still interested in songwriting, actually. I think the process of songwriting is interesting, because I've set a lot of poems to music. Now I'm going to try to see if I can work with my own songs, because the form fascinates me, and I'm still working on the guitar to make that fly. Nonfiction interests me. A lot more nonfiction stories are available and around that are on my mind. The story of, maybe I shouldn't mention this, but Mark Louviere in Cedar Falls, who was a doctor, a well-known general practitioner, who was caught with 100 pounds of meth in his garage. He was distributing meth, and he was given a 50-year term for that. His practice is shattered. Really successful people who do something terrible interest me. And that would be Jerry Mark and Mark Louviere, and there are a lot of people like that out there. But why is this? Why do they take lives that are working and really working in the world as successful people and destroy it? This is a mystery to me. Absolutely, and this is the hardest to explain. There's almost, I hate to say this because it sounds so religious, but there's a state of grace you get into where you're just kind of, it's easier to call it the zone. There's a zone you get into. I've meditated for 30 years, 20 minutes twice a day, good old transcendental meditation at the beginning. Now, I don't know, it's something completely different, but I think if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to write. There's a place where you have to get into that's a quiet spot in your mind, and ideas start to percolate. Everything starts to happen at that point. It's, I guess technically it's hypnagogic state. It's the state right before or after sleep. It isn't really sleep, but it isn't really awake. It's an altered state of consciousness, let's say that you can get into, that I can get into quite easily because I meditate. And I think meditation has really been informed, my writing has really been informed by meditation practice. Someone that can just make words sing. There's a song dimension. There's a rhythmic dimension to language. When language really works, there's a rhythm to it, and it's almost like music in a certain way. I think all great writers are also poets, but poetry to me is my best definition of poetry is weighted language, the language with weight. And I think when writers take it out of the dimension of the everyday, like conversational, and give it weight, they turn into writers. And writers with a little less weight are novelists, and writers with more weight are poets, because you can write four lines and it has as much weight as an entire novel, you know. The Old Dog Barks Back Without Looking Up, I Can Remember When It Was a Pup, is a novel, but it's in 2 lines. And the better one, We Dance Round in a Ring and Suppose, But the Secret Sits in the Middle and Knows, there's another novel, actually, in 2 lines. So heavily weighted. But so when I'm writing well, which isn't as often as I like it to be, I'm giving weight to the words, so they have weight and rhythm, weight and rhythm, and then you've got some writing that's worth reading. I think the idea is to get up every day and do something you think is worth doing creatively for a while. And my batteries run down in about 3 hours. I've got about 3 good hours a day, and then I have to just do other things. I can't concentrate and stay with it very long. Some days it's an hour, some days it's 4, but right around 3 hours I realize it's time to quit now. And then I'm free. I'm free to do other things. But up until then, I really feel obliged to stay with what I'm doing, my creative work. Yeah.